Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We are at the start of 2043 to 2044 free agency. And the Pirates have some money to spend, about $10 million, after once again we moved on from several arbitration eligible players between the end of the season and the start of free agency to free up some money, but also to unfortunately weaken our roster. But we do have money to try to improve it. Big holes we think we have right now are potentially backup outfielder, backup infielder. Clearly, anytime we can find an interesting bat, we'll go after it. Taking a look at the players that are available on free agency, certainly among some pitchers, there's certainly interesting pitchers out there. The issue is that we're probably pitcher heavy right now. Generally got pitchers and catchers back in most of the trades that we were making during the arbitration preparation period. So don't really need to focus on pitchers. And looking at batters, there are some big time players around, but not surprisingly, most of them are looking for big time money that we can't possibly afford. So our focus is really going to be on someone who can supplement our roster and also, sadly, someone who's popular. We've got to bump up fan interest. We've made the playoffs for the last 5 seasons with the Pirates. We went to the NLCS last year. We went to the NLDS this year after winning a wild card series. And we made over 21 or close to $21 million last year in terms of profit. Achieved all of our owner goals. And despite that, our budget for this season was kept exactly the same at $142 million. And we're down from our peak of $144 million. And a big part of the reason is that we're a small market with pathetic fan loyalty and mediocre fan interest. So the only lever that we can immediately press is trying to increase fan interest, which will hopefully support the slightly higher ticket price that we put in for next season. And if we can improve attendance with a higher ticket price, then our revenue per game will start moving in a more positive direction, and we can hopefully get this budget moving in a direction that allows us to build something sustainable here rather than something that right now still feels like it's kind of on a knife's edge. So given that we don't have the money to get a extremely popular and good player in free agency, what we did was kind of look for someone who's above average in contact, power, and eye, and also extremely popular. Not surprisingly, there's a couple of big free agents who are going to be making a lot of money. And as you can see, a lot of players making a lot of money, including Angel Aguilar, who we traded away 2 seasons ago and has become one of the top offensive players in the game, but not that good defensively, and still feel like obviously he has been a monster thus far, winning a Rookie of the Year, 2 All-Star appearances, a Silver Slugger, and a Playoff Series MVP. But we still have received who we think will be a big-time starting pitcher in return in Jose Montoya. Still has a little work to do on his slider and his control, but finally brought him up last year, and he's viewed as the number 81 prospect in the game. And then the other big acquisition that we picked up as part of that Aguilar trade was Ethan Fox, who we think can play a pretty important role on our team going forward, potentially even as a very budget-friendly starting third baseman for us for the next couple of years. So, and the fact is we do still have a ton of good outfielders coming towards us. Isaiah Hill was Rookie of the Year back in 2039. Henry Gonzalez, who we picked number 1 overall in 2038, just completed a Rookie of the Year campaign. Still have Ramon Herrera in center field. And we still have Alfredo Velasquez, who we picked up in a trade a few years ago with the Phillies, who can be a first baseman outfielder for us, although not particularly good defensively. And we've got more help coming in the system. So certainly a bat like Aguilar's would help, but we're not going to bemoan the fact that we've moved on from him. Just have to hope that Montoya does end up really being a top of the rotation type of starter for us, and that we get something useful from Fox. But when we look at this list, there is one name that maybe we can potentially bring on. We're not going to be able to bring on a 25-year-old 5-star potential player or a 26-year-old. The cost in terms of talent for those players is going to be staggering. But Alex Vasquez, an old friend of ours from Kansas City, is in the last year of his contract with the Angels. And he's coming off 2, for him, mediocre seasons with the Angels. Hit .256 with 29 homers, and then .239 this past season with 33 home runs. His speed is kind of shot at this point, so this is a player who led the American League in doubles 5 times with Kansas City, won 3 batting titles with Kansas City. Clearly on the downslide of his career batting average is now under .295 after 3 pretty weak seasons in a row. But you look at his OPS pluses and his WRC pluses, and he's still a pretty useful offensive player. And he's also extremely popular, which we need to do. So as I mentioned, I feel like we're pretty good in our starting outfield at this point. And with Luis Flores and Alfredo Velasquez, right now we have first base and DH covered. But clearly, if we're able to put together a deal to bring on Alex Vasquez, he would slide right in as a starting designated hitter, most likely. We could play him in left or right if we had to, but the preference would be to put him into DH and then mix and match a little bit with some of the younger players. But I think he could give our lineup a boost offensively for a year. And most importantly, sadly at this point, he could also help us send some tickets. And I think that the Angels, given the amount of money that they're owing him and the fact that he is kind of on the downside of his career, I don't think we're going to be totally held up in what it'll take to get him. And we've pieced together a deal that will allow the Angels to retain 75% of his contract. So it'll still leave us with almost half of the money we have to spend on players, and we're not making a long-term commitment since we don't have any budget available for the season after next. It's not a costless venture, and it's actually pretty expensive for a 1-year rental of a player in his late 30s. But as I've talked about, it's not just about a player who can help us on the field, which Vasquez, I think, still certainly can, but it's also about getting more fans in the seats and playing the fan interest game. So from that perspective, I think we're going to do this. Have to pass on Ethan Mingo, who was the cornerstone of the trade that we recently did when we had to get rid of our closer, Manny Collazo, because he was going to be making about $16 million in arbitration. So it stinks to have to flip him so quickly, and he's very popular, which is not as popular as Vasquez is, obviously, but we may take a little bit of a hit on that front. But we're overloaded in pitchers right now, so I'm okay giving him up. We have to give up minor league catcher Chris Peace, decent defensively, good personality, but not someone who's a big-time part of our future. Another catcher, Danny Anala, decent personality, but he's never made it out of rookie ball. Alex Calderon, a center fielder who was a scouting discovery a few years ago. Looks like he can definitely hit the ball over the fence, and he's got some speed, but certainly was not impressive in his rookie league debut at the age of 19. And with the high greed and the low work ethic, not the worst personality to be getting rid of in our system. Daniel Gonzalez is a 8th-round draft pick from our first draft with the Pirates. Low leadership. He's made it up to A-ball, but he's coming off a torn labrum and doesn't look like he's going to really develop into anything special. So Mingo's definitely the cornerstone of the trade. Couple guys who maybe still can develop into anything, but I don't think there's a huge chance of that happening. I am going to try to get them to just retain a little bit more of his money, 80%. They say that they'll think about it, so we'll see what happens on that front. And unfortunately, the Angels unwilling to do that deal, so we'll have to go back to the table. I think we should be able to pull something together, but may have gotten a little greedy trying to get that little bit of extra money off of the books. And it seems like I probably should have taken that deal, waited a couple weeks hoping that the Angels would get a little more realistic in what they were looking for, but they're looking for more minor league talent, not willing to keep as much salary, and still looking for one of the top young players in the game in Longoria or Gonzalez as part of the deal. So unfortunately, right now we're kind of in a waiting pattern with Vasquez. Probably going to wait until January at this point. I can't imagine he's going anywhere, but maybe as the off-season continues to linger, they'll think differently about things, can take a quick look and just see what their financial situation looks like. They do have about $3 million for free agents, a lot of money for extensions, huge player payroll. You know, they're obviously a big market team with good fan loyalty, awesome fan interest, all the things that we wish we had in Pittsburgh that we don't. So they can afford to keep him. Hopefully we can revisit things with them down the line and make some progress on a potential trade, because it would be nice to increase that fan interest somehow, particularly with season tickets starting to go on sale pretty shortly. And the fan interest strikes us once again. Let Tony Jones, soon to be 30-year-old reliever, go. Just didn't need him, but he is very popular. And it's a 4-point hit to our fan interest from losing a middle reliever. So we're only a little bit better than we were at the start of the offseason at this point. And probably screwed up the Vasquez acquisition, who was really kind of the only guy we could potentially afford. Now we're going to have to give up a lot more to get him on board or move on to somebody else. So the early stages of this offseason are not going well for us. And the Rule 5 draft is coming up shortly, so we're going to have to protect a few players, most notably Alex Ruacho, number 4 pick overall in 2039, number 46 prospect in the game. Still would like him to develop a little more at AAA before we bring him up, but he will hopefully be a good offensive player helping us out in the not-so-distant future, so want to make sure that he is protected, so we're going to put him on the 40-man. Catcher Chris Rodriguez is a guy we picked in the second round in 2039. Hasn't made it above Double-A ball, but still has a good personality, pretty solid defensive catcher who looks like he could hit respectably at the major league level, so certainly don't want to risk losing him either. Those are kind of the two main guys. We're going to take a look through the rest. Bobby Astorga is a pitcher that we've had pretty big hopes for, 4th rounder back in 2039. He's got great stamina, and he was pretty respectable in AAA this past year. I don't know that we'd lose him, but I don't want to take the risk of losing him, so we're going to add him onto the 40-man also. Take a look at the rest of these guys. Not sure how much else there is that we really need to protect, but at this point, hopefully there's a good player who also happens to be extremely popular who's rolling through the Rule 5 that we'll be able to pick up. And we've made it now to the Rule 5 draft. We did end up protecting a few more players, kind of bolstered our 40-man roster, but we've got room to bring somebody on. You can see we're picking near the end of the round, so probably not going to be, well, there's probably not anyone all that exciting in it anyways. If there's anyone really great, probably not going to be around when we're picking, but we'll take a look at what's out there. and let you know if there's anything we should chase after. I do have my eye on one player, interested in seeing what our scouting director recommends. And he doesn't think we should do anything, but I'm going to disagree with him. As I mentioned, we've got a couple spots available in our outfield. We're hoping to have a big-time hitter in one of them, which is why we were looking at Vasquez. And we're kind of hoping for a fifth outfielder who could play decent defense for one of them. In Arturo Arellano, has never played above high A ball, but certainly looks like he could be a respectable major league bat. And he can play left, center, and right. Decent outfield range, pretty good arm, and kind of acceptable error rating. I don't think there's a guarantee that he'll make our 26-man roster, but he does kind of fit the bill of what we were hoping for in a fifth outfielder, except that he's not popular. But I think it's worth at least bringing him into camp. So we're going to go ahead and draft him. Move on to the next round. Presumably our scouting director still doesn't think we should take anybody. I think that's probably right here in the second round. We're going to spend a little more time just making sure of that fact before I move on. And there's just not much left. There's a few extremely popular players. I don't know how much of a bump we would get picking them in the draft, and my fear is that we don't get any bump for picking them in the draft, and when we cut them because they're not good enough to make the team coming out of spring training, they'll probably take another 5 points out of our fan interest. So given that I don't think there's any prospect for these players to make our roster based on their ability, not going to chase after any of the pitchers, and we are just going to auto draft the rest of this Rule 5. And it was a very quiet draft, just 3 players taken, including our pick of Arellano. So we're getting near the end of November, or the end of December. I do think that we are going to reach back out at some point to the Angels about Mr. Vasquez, see if maybe we can piece something together to bring him on board. Would be nice to get a boost to fan interest at this point. You can see we are on pace to sell a few more season tickets than last year, but certainly not the type of increase that we were hoping for. And another popular player would probably help us on that front. And we're also getting close to the day when we'll find out if our former star with the Kansas City Royals, Bobby Witt Jr., finally gets into the Hall of Fame. And it's time to find out whether Bobby Witt Jr. is headed to Cooperstown. In his first year of eligibility, which was 2 years ago, he led the voting, but nobody was elected to the Hall. Last year, he dropped off in terms of his percentages. There were, I believe, a couple players who made the Hall. He was not one of them, and his voting moved in the wrong direction. So, very interesting trend. Normally, a player like him, who was, I think, in the mid to high 60s in his percentage on the first ballot, would continue moving closer. That's not what happened last year. Let's see what happened here in the 2044 Hall of Fame class. And he is still not there. Only one player elected this year, Vlad Guerrero Jr. Obviously had a monster career, 99.7% of the votes. You can see just some incredible years for him. 783 home runs, over 2,100 ribbies, 291 career batting average, and a 100.6 WAR. I guess the positive thing is that Witt was number 2 on the entire list, and his percentages moved back in the right direction, and the highest he's ever been. Okay, he was 63.7, then he somehow dropped to 48.7. Now he's up to 67.6. So he's kind of in the low to mid 60s. Now he's kind of in the mid to high 60s. So the best voting attention that he has gotten. But 3 times in Bobby Witt Jr. is still not a Hall of Famer. And another player who was on our team for a couple of months has left, Angel Calvan, who had a 3.68 ERA in 36.2 innings, has left, and fan interest in the Pirates almost crashed, despite the fact that we brought on 3 pitchers through trade this offseason that are younger and better than him. And our fan interest is a 56. Obviously, it's supposed to be challenging when you're playing with a penny pinching owner in a small market. And if you're playing a big market team like the Yankees or the Mets or the Dodgers or the Red Sox or the Cubs, the Angels, it's not going to matter all that much. And we clearly showed in our previous playthrough of Kansas City that we were, with decent ownership, able to kind of turn a pretty small market into one where fan loyalty and fan interest were both pretty high. So didn't have to pay a lot of attention to it, but where you're playing a game and every penny matters, and you kind of take a hit like that, and you can see the number of season tickets went down by about 400. The expected attendance per game went down by about 2,000 just because a relief pitcher signed with another team and you didn't really have a spot for him, and he wasn't someone who had a long-term relationship with the fans. It's kind of frustrating, and it's kind of broken immersion at this point that I've spent so much time with the Pirates kind of just focused on this silly fan interest dynamic, but it drives the financials to a big degree, and I can't change the market size or the fan loyalty immediately, and in some cases really at all. It's stuff that evolves over decades, I assume, with market size. Fan interest is the only lever I have to press, and it feels like it's always one step forward, 2 steps back. I think we're lower now than we were at the end of this past season. Even if we're able to somehow piece together a deal to bring Alex Vasquez on board, what's that going to get us to? 60? And then when he's going to leave next year, it's going to crash down to 50 probably. I mean, I get from the perspective of a programmer, it's easier when you just kind of look at a player. They've got a popularity rating, and it's plus X when they join and minus X when they leave. But it does kind of seem that for a team that's enjoyed, it's literally the second most successful stretch in the history of this franchise. The only stretch the Pirates have ever had that's been better than 4 playoff appearances in 5 seasons was back in the early to mid 1970s. So this is, for the fans who are at the games at this point, the best Pirates that they've ever seen in their lifetimes. And it's just not having a material impact at all on fan interest, which is kind of frustrating. So now we've simmed ahead to late January, so it's been about a month and a half since we checked in on Vasquez. And it's, I get that if a trade doesn't work, they're going to want more. But with him, it was like they went from being realistic to just like stupid in terms of what they were asking for a 37, very well might be 38 right now, 38-year-old player who is coming off a season when he hit under 240. He's still obviously a good major league player, don't get me wrong. And he's still 37. Oh, he actually only turned 37 at the end of October, so he's going to be 37 for this season. Still extremely popular. We'll see if we can maybe work something out. They're a little less than before, so it does seem like waiting may have helped us, but we're certainly not going to be giving any of these players for a 37-year-old outfielder, that's for sure. And unfortunately with Vasquez, it looks like they went from we put together a package that wasn't painful, but we're giving up a good major league pitcher who's pretty young, as well as some prospects and non-prospects, a couple of catchers, which are always useful to have around. And they were going to keep 75% of his contract, and now even to get them to take 60% of his contract, basically have to give them one of the 4 best players on our team. So I just don't think it makes sense at this point. We may pivot to Yoshitaro Nakahura, 30-year-old coming over from Japan. He's wrecked physically, but he is extremely popular. Issue is he wants an 8-year deal, and we're only going to be able to offer him 1 year, and we're not going to be able to offer him the kind of money that he's looking for, most likely. But if he's willing to take a 1-year, $10 million deal, which, given that, and we'll give him a huge bonus if he's MVP, because he's not going to be MVP. I mean, the preseason has started. We're not in spring training yet, but clearly at his age, with his wrecked physical situation, not as much demand for him as he may have hoped. I can't imagine he's going to go for this $10 million contract. Nope. We're not going to chase after him either. But the fact that we're going backwards on fan interest is dispiriting, to say the least. And the fact that the price from Vasquez went from reasonable to extremely onerous over a 5% difference in what the Angels might retain in his salary seems a little dramatic, but it is what it is at this point. There's a few other extremely popular players out there, but they are just not very good at baseball. I guess we could bring on Min Yol Kim. Is a defensive wizard, but I couldn't hit in the Korean League. It's probably going to be a pretty big challenge against major league pitchers at the age of 32. Looking at the pitchers, we don't need pitchers. There still are some extremely popular pitchers out there. Ramon Serrato. He's fine. I mean, he's a bullpen arm. Not all that excited about potentially bringing him on board. This has been a pretty depressing offseason. And just to put Vasquez into perspective, to get them to keep 60% of his salary, which is what we'd need just to be able to fit him on payroll, we now need to give them one of the top players, not just on our team, but quite honestly in the game. In addition to closer Sergio Robinson, who's a 25-year-old, looks like he could be a useful back of the bullpen arm. Starting pitcher Alex Roa, a 16-year-old who we just discovered, not the best personality in the world, but certainly has some upside as a prospect. Left fielder Danny Calles, who is a pretty good hitting prospect, was a third-round pick drafted in 2040. As well as first baseman Omar Garza, another guy with a little bit of power. So not great prospects, but certainly people that are young and could develop, in addition to one of the best players in baseball for a 37-year-old who's hit 256 and 239 in each of the last 2 years. And, it's just, I'm kicking myself because we could have had that deal at 75% and we were trying to get it to 80% just because every penny matters so much with these Pirates. But now we are finishing up the off-season with spring training starting just a few days away, and basically the big move we've made is a Rule 5 acquisition. Literally, that's it. A fifth outfielder. And we've got to find someone popular. We're going into the 2044 season with even less fan interest than we had at the end of last season, which seems unfathomable given the moves that we've made and the limited tenure with our team and the weak performance on our team of some of the players that we've lost that have negatively impacted fan interest. But it is what it is. I know the rules of the game. It's the game I'm trying to play. I'm just not playing it very well right now. So we've reached the start of spring training. We've got a lot of work to do. You can see the money for free agents is now really low because we've got so many players on the spring training roster. So we got a small, tiny lifeline when earlier today Nakahara reached back out to us having second thoughts. It does look like his contract demand is more reasonable now. I don't know if he's really going to go for that, but yeah, I had offered you $10 million before, but it's a different situation now. I'm going to offer you $5 million. We'll keep in the bonuses for MVP and All-Star because I don't really think you're going to get that. Actually, it says he's looking for $4.6 million. We need every penny. So it sounds like he's just playing games with us. What's his demand? No, he will go for the $4.5 million. All right, we'll submit that to Nakahara. Again, I don't think he is all that great a player at this point in his career. He's certainly not as good a hitter as Alex Vasquez, but we avoid depleting our team to bring him on board, and the main purpose of potentially bringing the veteran on board is still simply the fact that he's extremely popular. The fact that he's wrecked physically is brutal. He is better defensively than Vasquez, so that's positive, but given that he's wrecked physically, I don't know that we really want him out in the outfield all that often, but certainly looks like he is a bat who could potentially help us a little bit. But again, it's not really even about that. It's just about the popularity of him and hopefully maybe being able to juice the numbers around our fan interest and ultimately our season ticket sales and our ultimate attendance by bringing him on board. Can see that we did end up cutting our scouting and development budgets a little bit from the rate that we've been running at. It's been a pretty unproductive off season, but we're only at the start of spring training. We will see what happens with the offer that we just made to Nakahara. There's a lot of other players out there, not many of whom are very popular and very good, but there are other players we can bring on. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully in our next episode we'll make some progress with Nakahara, and we will add some additional players to the team. Interesting to see that supposedly the Angels are talking to Nakahara also after they won't trade us Vasquez, but Now they're talking that he's going to make $21.6 million. So I'm guessing he's going to come back to us shortly and tell us that our offer is not acceptable. I'm looking at the Angels financially right now. They don't have that kind of money to offer him 20 some odd million, but they can offer him a lot more than we can. So we will see what happens. Pretty crappy offseason, though, for the Pirates. Fortunately, we had a good team last year. We've still got some young folks coming. We've bolstered our pitching staff through the trades we made at the start of the offseason and the arbitration period. Definitely have some depth issues, particularly in our outfield right now, but there's still another month plus till the season gets started, and we'll focus on trying to fill some of those holes in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a better day than I did.